Hi everyone, it is good to talk to you once again through this video. In the last video, we learned about Frederick Sorio's portrait that is entitled Utopian Vision. In that portrait, you saw people from different countries came to the Statue of Liberty, irrespective of their language and nationality. They paid homage to the Statue of Liberty. In the previous video, we discussed those things, and now we are learning about the rise of nationalism in Europe. Under the same title, today I would like to talk to you about the making of nationalism in Europe. Under the title, The Rise of Nationalism in Europe. Let us discuss. Making of nationalism in Europe. Now let me tell you, what is a nationalism? What is nationalism? A nationalism is a state of belongingness or togetherness towards a nation. It is a spirit of belongingness. It is a spirit of oneness or a spirit of togetherness towards a nation. And this spirit of togetherness, which is termed as nationalism. And in other words, it is the spirit of love and pride for one's own country. And it is a belief that one's own country is better than any other country. See, my dear children, it is the nationalism is the spirit of love and pride for one's own country. When people possess this spirit of togetherness or spirit of nationalism, and definitely they take pride and they take delight in their nation and feel proud to be the citizens of their respective nation. It is because the spirit of nationalism that binds the people together. So the spirit of togetherness, the spirit of belongingness towards their nation, which is termed as nationalism. When people possess this nationalism, generally they love their nation and think that their country is better than other countries. It is quite common. So during the 19th century, nationalism emerged as a force in Europe. During 19th century, this spirit of nationalism emerged as a great force in Europe. And later, that force or that spirit spread to different parts of the world. But during the 19th century, it emerged as a force in Europe. Particularly, it was found during the times of French Revolution. And it brought about several changes in the political and mental world of Europe. This nationalism brought about several changes, tremendous changes, particularly in the sphere of in the political and mental world of Europe. So entire entirely, so many changes, political changes came, and the changes in political and mental world of Europe. So it brought about several changes. It brought several changes, particularly in the political and mental world of Europe. And in political arena and political sphere, we find tremendous changes in Europe, particularly in France. So the revolutionary spirit spread all over Europe only after the French Revolution. We know very well. And you might have already learnt in class 9th under the title The French Revolution, where you have learnt all things, how the revolution broke out in France and how that how that ideals spread to the rest of the world. You have already learned in class 9. So here, my dear children, the revolutionary spirit spread all over Europe only after the French Revolution. Austrian Chancellor Metternich has rightly said, when France sneezes, the rest of Europe catches cold. Austrian Prince and Chancellor Metternich said, when France sneezes, the rest of Europe catches cold. It is correct because every change came from France only. So all things broke out, all the revolutions, movements, upheavals, upsurges, all these erupted only in France. That's why, has rightly said, when France sneezes, the rest of Europe catches a cold. It is quite correct and relevant. The political developments in France were stimulative to other countries of Europe. So many countries derived the inspiration from France only. For the first time, when the French Revolution broke out, many countries in the world derived their spirit, derived their inspiration from the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity. That is from French Revolution. The political developments in France were stimulative to so many countries of Europe, and most of the Europeans followed France because they took France as an example. Most of the European countries followed the example of France, my dears, because France spread awareness among Europeans. It spread awareness among all the Europeans because it sets values and standards for the entire continent. Other countries of Europe just simply followed France. You know very well, the great ideals, liberty, equality, and fraternity took roots only in France. And these ideals really inspired the people all over the world. And countries got inspiration from these ideals, including India. So that is why most of the nations in Europe just simply followed France. So revolutionary spirit spread from France only. The ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity gained popularity and great momentum, my dear children. So these ideals influenced the whole world. Liberty, equality, and fraternity. These principles, these ideals influenced the whole world. That's why these ideals gained great popularity. And educated people got attracted to these ideals. And later, you know very well, so many monarchical countries were overthrown and dictatorships were abolished in so many countries because these ideals, liberty, equality, and fraternity influenced the educated people. And then they led great movements and revolutions in their countries. Even in our country also, the great leaders Mahatma Gandhi, Nehru, and all these great leaders were greatly inspired. Raja Rama Mohan Rai were greatly inspired by these great ideals. And later, they started national movement here against the colonial powers. And at last, after fighting, after great fight, we got independence. So here, the liberty, the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity really influenced the whole world, my dear children. And that is why these ideals gained great popularity and great momentum. And educated people got attracted to these ideals and were inspired. The French philosopher Ernest Renan said, a nation is the culmination of a long past of endeavors, sacrifice, and devotion. Yes, it is true. Because a nation is the climax of a long past of endeavors, sacrifices, and devotion. It is true, my dear children. A nation will be emerged after so many endeavors, after so many sacrifices. So Renan has said, a nation is a culmination of a long past of endeavors, sacrifice, and devotion. Now, let me tell you some of the important factors that led to the rise of nationalism in Europe, my dear. There are certain, what do we call, factors. Ultimately, these factors led to the rise of nationalism in Europe. Now, prominent among them were mainly the rise of new middle class. That is one of the important factors that led to the rise of nationalism in Europe. What is that? The rise of new middle class. Yes, rise of middle class. And second one, spread of the ideology of liberalism. And third factor, the spirit of conservatism and the Treaty of Vienna. The fourth one, the rise of revolutionaries. Now let us discuss about these four important factors one by one. Okay, how these factors led or prompted to the rise of nationalism in Europe. The first one, the rise of a new middle class. So due to industrialization, a working class population and middle classes made up of industrialists. Whenever the industrialization took place in Europe, as a result, a working class people or the population increased in Europe, and later middle class grew up, and these working class population and middle class people made up of industrialists, businessmen, professionals. All these came into being. The idea of national unity gained popularity. An idea of national unity, yes, national unity gained popularity because of the rising of all these industrialists, businessmen, professionals, particularly the middle class. And we see educated people in the middle class. In the French Revolution, you might have heard about that. Mainly the great lawyers and philosophers. All the educated people were the part of middle class, and they led a great that movement, revolution in France. So a middle class, particularly in Europe, this middle class section led to the rise of nationalism. So in the middle class, we see industrialists, businessmen, professionals. All these come under this middle class section, and this middle class people ultimately led to the rise of nationalism in Europe. And later, second factor that led to the rise of nationalism in Europe was ideology of liberalism. What is liberalism? Actually, liberalism, the word liber, actually liberalism, the word liberalism is derived from the Latin word liber, which means free. Which means free. In the 19th century, ideas of national unity were closely related to the ideology of liberalism. Liberalism means here liberty, free. But before French Revolution, there was no liberty for the people. People did not have any freedom to express their views. No freedom of speech and expression for the people in those times. But after the French Revolution, people got liberty. So, ideology of liberalism, this also led to the rise of nationalism for the new middle classes. Liberalism stood for freedom of the individual. It stood for the freedom for the individual and equality of all before the law. But before the French Revolution, where there was no equality, there was no freedom for the people. There was no equality before the law. So that is why after the revolution, this ideology of liberalism gained great momentum. So liberalism stood for freedom for the individual. It stood for equality before law. In France, the right to vote was granted exclusively to property owning persons. Very few people only those who are financially well off, those who are rich, only wealthy people only got or they were only granted a right to vote. Only property owning people, those who had property, were only given a right to vote. At the same time, in the economic sphere, liberalism stood for the freedom of markets also. Yes, liberalism also stood for the market, freedom of markets, and the abolition of state-imposed restrictions on the movement of goods. So in 1834, a customs union called Zollverein was formed, which abolished all the tariff barriers and reduced the number of currencies were 30 to 2. Particularly before 1834, in Germany, particularly in Germany, Germany was, before 1834, it was divided into a number of kingdoms or states. So there was no political unity among the people. So each state and each kingdom was ruled by a monarch or a ruler. So there was no spirit of togetherness or unity among the people. So therefore, each state or each kingdom had its own currency, no uniformity. So as a result, from state to state, we see the differences. So to just wipe out these differences, in the year 1834, a customs union called Zollverein was introduced. The main aim of this Zollverein or customs union was to abolish all the trade barriers or differences and to reduce the number of currencies. Previously, just only in Germany, there were nearly 30 currencies were in existence. But all that 30 currencies were reduced to only 2 only. And it was possible only because of the introduction of the customs union called Zollverein. And because of this Zollverein, currencies were reduced and tariff barriers or differences or trade barriers were removed or abolished. And as a result, the main important thing here is that the people, by just doing this or by removing all these tariff barriers, people ultimately got united and the spirit of unity prevailed among the people. So all this come under, my dear, ideology of liberalism. So I stop here, my dear children, and in the next video we shall discuss the remaining concepts, and meanwhile you just continue to read the textbooks. Okay children, and if you have any doubts, just ring up to me. I will call to you and clarify your doubts. Okay, thank you for watching this video. Thank you very much. Bye.